Captain Handbit wiped sweat from her forehead as she climbed the rocky path. The mountain air was cool and fresh. After a week of desk work, this hike was exactly what she needed. Handbit was not like other pilots in the Korean Air Force. Where others followed the book, she found new ways to fly. Her commanders both admired and worried about her skills. She could make planes do things they were not built to do. Just a little farther, she told herself, adjusting the heavy backpack. The map showed a small lake just beyond the next ridge. That would be a perfect place to camp. As she reached the top, Handbit stopped suddenly. Something glinted in the valley below. Something that did not belong. "What is that?" she whispered. It looked like metal, but no one built anything this far into the mountains. Curious, Handbit changed her path. Years of military training told her to be careful, but her mind wanted answers. The shiny object was hidden between large rocks, as if it had fallen there. As she got closer, her heart beat faster. This was not normal wreckage. The metal was like nothing she had seen before. It was smooth and had strange marks that looked like writing. "This is not from Earth," she said to herself, then laughed at how silly that sounded. But the thought stuck in her mind. Handbit followed the trail of broken pieces. They led to a small valley hidden by tall trees. There, half buried in dirt, was something that made her freeze. A round, flat craft. Like a giant disc, like the flying saucers in old movies. "This can't be real," she said, but her eyes did not lie. The craft was about 20 meters wide. Its surface was dull silver, with strange blue lines running across it. One side was pushed into the ground. The other side had a dark hole, as if something had hit it hard. Handbit put down her backpack and took out her phone. No signal, of course. She was too far from any tower. She took pictures anyway, then slowly walked toward the craft. Every step felt heavy. This would change everything. If this was real, nothing would be the same again. The craft had no windows she could see. No clear way to get inside. The blue lines seemed to pulse faintly, like they had power running through them. Handbit touched the metal surface. It was warm, not cold like normal metal, and it hummed slightly, a feeling she could sense through her fingers. Her pilot's mind started working. The shape was perfect for flying. No sharp edges. The damage looked like it came from a hard landing, not a crash. Whatever this was, it was meant to fly. What Handbit didn't know was that she was being watched. Inside the craft, two beings looked at screens showing the human outside. They were tall and thin with large, dark eyes. Their skin had a blue tint. "A human found us," said the first one, named Duri. "And it's a female." The second alien, Taiho, made a sound like a laugh. "Just our luck. Their females are even more primitive than the males." "We should scare her away," Duri suggested. "We can't let her find out about us while we're stuck here." Taiho watched as Handbit examined the hull with expert eyes. "Look at her. She's touching it like she understands it. Humans are so funny." "She won't figure anything out," Duri said. "Their technology is hundreds of years behind ours. Even our broken old ship is beyond what they can understand." They watched as Handbit found a panel and started examining it closely. "She's persistent. I'll give her that," Taiho muttered. Neither alien realized they had just made their first mistake, underestimating Captain Handbit. Handbit's fingers moved carefully over the strange panel on the craft. Years of working with aircraft had taught her to respect unknown technology. The panel felt warm under her touch, almost alive. "There must be a way to open this," she said to herself. The markings looked like buttons or controls. Inside the craft, Duri and Taiho watched with growing worry. "She's touching the emergency access panel," Duri said. "If she presses the right spots." "A human couldn't possibly figure it out," Taiho said. But his voice didn't sound sure. Handbit noticed that some marks glowed brighter when she touched them. A pattern began to form in her mind. Not random marks, but a system. She followed what looked like a line of symbols, pressing each one in order. Suddenly, A soft hum filled the air. The panel slid open, revealing a dark space inside. She opened it. Dury shouted in alarm. How did she do that? It's just luck, Tahoe insisted. The emergency system must have activated on its own. Handbit stepped back, heart racing. She hadn't expected the craft to respond. Part of her wanted to run, the smarter part, but the pilot in her, the part that always wanted to understand how things worked, won out. She took a small flashlight from her pocket and pointed it into the opening. The beam revealed a narrow passage leading inside. The walls were covered with more of the strange blue lines. "This is crazy," Handbit whispered, but she ducked down and stepped inside anyway. The passage led to a round room filled with what could only be control panels, screens with unknown symbols, chairs that didn't look made for human bodies, and a soft, pulsing light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Hello," she called out, not really expecting an answer. "Is anyone here?" Inside a small room off the main area, Dury turned to Tahoe in panic. "She's inside. We need to activate the defense systems." "Those don't work anymore," Tahoe said. "Nothing works since the power core was damaged." "Then we have no choice. We have to show ourselves." Tahoe looked horrified. "She'll panic. Humans always do when they see us. Better that than letting her wander around and damage something important." With great reluctance, they opened the door to the main room. Handbit turned at the sound, her flashlight beam landing directly on the two aliens. They waited for the scream, for the human to run in terror. Instead, Handbit took a deep breath and lowered her flashlight slightly so it wasn't shining in their eyes. "Hello," she said calmly. "I'm Captain Handbit of the Korean Air Force." Dury and Tahoe looked at each other in confusion. "You're not afraid?" Dury asked in perfect Korean, thanks to their translation device. Handbit's eyes widened at hearing them speak her language, but she kept her composure. "I'm surprised," she admitted, "but I've seen enough strange things in my life to know not to panic before understanding the situation." Tahoe stepped forward. "This is our craft. You are trespassing." Handbit nodded. "I apologize for entering without permission. Your ship appears damaged. Do you need help?" The aliens laughed, a strange whistling sound. "Help? From a human?" Dury said. "Our technology is centuries beyond yours." "Then why are you stuck here?" Handbit asked simply. The aliens fell silent. "Our power core was damaged during atmospheric entry," Dury finally explained with clear reluctance. "This craft is obsolete by our standards. We've been unable to repair it." Handbit looked around the control room with new interest. "Maybe a fresh perspective would help. I'm a pilot and engineer. I understand complex systems. A human female couldn't possibly understand our technology," Tahoe said dismissively. Handbit smiled slightly. She had heard similar words from male colleagues throughout her career. "You might be surprised," she said. "Why don't you show me what's wrong? What do you have to lose?" Tahoe and Dury looked at each other. The human female stood there, waiting. She didn't seem afraid or confused. This was not what they expected. "Our ship needs parts we don't have," Tahoe said finally, "and knowledge you don't have." Handbit crossed her arms. "You haven't told me what's broken yet." Dury sighed and pointed to a round device in the center of the room. It was about the size of a car tire. Blue light flickered weakly inside it. "This is our power core. It uses energy from, well, you wouldn't understand the science." "Try me," Handbit said. Tahoe laughed. "Your people still burn dead plants and animals for energy. Our power core uses quantum fields to draw energy from multiple dimensions." Handbit walked closer to the device. "So it pulls energy from somewhere else, like a door that opens to a place with more power." The aliens looked surprised at her simple but accurate description. "Yes," Dury admitted, "but the mechanism that opens and controls this door is damaged. We've tried to fix it, but we need special tools." Handbit bent down to look at the core from different angles. "What happens when you try to power it up?" It starts to work, then fails, Tahoe explained. The energy flow becomes unstable and shuts down. Hanbit nodded. This reminded her of engine problems she had fixed before. Different technology, but similar problems. Let me study your systems, she suggested. Maybe I'll see something you missed. Tahoe snorted. Impossible. I am a top engineer in our world. Yet you're stuck here, Hanbit pointed out. Sometimes fresh eyes help. Before Tahoe could argue more, a loud beeping came from one of the control panels. Dury rushed over and touched several symbols. A 3D map appeared in the air above the panel. What is it? Hanbit asked, amazed by the floating image. Dury's face showed worry. A Gaiol ship has entered your solar system. Gaiol? Who are they? Our enemies, Tahoe explained. They've been following us, tracking our ship. They want our technology, Dury added. Even old technology like this craft. And if they find out humans have seen us. Tahoe looked at Hanbit. What happens then? She asked. They would take humans for study, Dury said quietly. Not kind studies. Hanbit felt a chill. This was bigger than just helping two stranded aliens. Now Earth could be in danger. How long until they get here? She asked. Dury checked the map. 3 days, maybe 4. Then we have no time to waste, Hanbit said firmly. Show me everything about your power core. Now. Tahoe still looked doubtful. What makes you think you can solve a problem our best minds couldn't fix? Hanbit thought about her career. About all the times men had asked her similar questions. Because I've spent my life fixing things people said couldn't be fixed, she answered. And because you have no other options right now. The aliens were silent for a moment. She's right, Dury said finally. We have nothing to lose. Tahoe nodded reluctantly. Fine. I'll show you our technical files. But don't touch anything without asking first. Deal, Hanbit said. She held out her hand, then realized the aliens might not know the gesture. To her surprise, Dury reached out and awkwardly shook it. As Tahoe brought up diagrams on a screen, Hanbit studied them carefully. The technology was far beyond what humans had built, but the principles weren't completely alien. Energy flow, containment fields, stabilization systems, things she understood from her work with experimental aircraft. And somewhere in all this complexity was a solution. She just had to find it before the Gaiol arrived. Outside, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the valley where the alien craft lay hidden. For now, day turned into night, and night into day again. Hanbit hardly noticed. She sat on the floor of the alien craft, surrounded by strange tools and glowing diagrams. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but her mind was sharp. This connection here, she said, pointing to a blue line on the floating diagram. It looks like it controls energy flow from the core to your engines. Dury nodded. Yes, but the calibration system is damaged. Hanbit shook her head. I don't think it's damage. I think it's just wrong. Tahoe, who had been watching from across the room, came closer. Wrong? What do you mean wrong? When your ship entered Earth's atmosphere, it encountered different physical conditions than what it was set for, Hanbit explained. Gravity, magnetic fields, air pressure, they're all different here than where you come from. Dury's large eyes blinked rapidly. That makes sense, but our automatic systems should have adjusted. Unless they were already set incorrectly before you came here, Hanbit suggested. She pointed to another part of the diagram. This looks like a manual override. Was it activated? The two aliens looked at each other. Yes, Tahoe admitted. Our ship is old. The automatic systems failed years ago. We had to set everything manually. Hanbit smiled. This was progress. So you didn't crash because of damage. You crashed because your settings were wrong for Earth's conditions. Dury seemed excited. Can you fix it? Maybe, Hanbit said. But I need to understand more about how your ship works. Over the next day, Handbit asked endless questions. How did the energy flow through the ship? How did the control systems work? What materials were used in the power core? The aliens were surprised by her quick understanding. This reminds me of an experimental jet I worked on last year, Handbit told them as she studied a power conduit. It used magnetic fields to control plasma flow. Your people can create plasma engines? Dury asked, surprised. Early versions, Handbit said. Not as advanced as yours, but the basic principles are similar. Tahoe still seemed doubtful. Even if you understand some of our technology, fixing the power core is much harder. Handbit stood up and stretched her tired muscles. When I was in flight school, my instructor's plane lost power during a storm. Everyone said to bail out. Instead, he rerouted power through the backup systems in a way they weren't designed for. It wasn't supposed to work, but it did. She walked to the power core and circled it slowly. Sometimes the solution isn't fixing what's broken. It's finding a new way to use what still works. Late that night, Handbit had a breakthrough. She woke Dury from sleep, her eyes bright with excitement. I figured it out, she said. Your power core isn't damaged, it's miscalibrated. Dury blinked sleepily. What do you mean? The energy door, as I call it, is opening in the wrong way. It's like trying to open a door by pushing when you should pull. She showed Dury her notes. Unlike the aliens' neat diagrams, Handbit's were rough sketches with many crossed-out sections and arrows pointing everywhere. These calculations show how to recalibrate the core for Earth's conditions, she explained. We need to adjust these 3 settings here. Dury studied the notes. Slowly, understanding dawned on the alien's face. This might actually work, Dury admitted. From the doorway, Tahoe spoke. If you're right, we need special tools to make these adjustments. Handbit grinned. I have tools at my cabin. Not alien tools, but I think I can make them work. For the first time, Tahoe looked at the human with something close to respect. We have 2 days before the Gaiol arrive, he said. Let's try your way. The morning sun was bright as Handbit led the 2 aliens through the forest. Dury and Tahoe wore large coats with hoods to hide their appearance. They walked slowly, not used to Earth's gravity. How much farther to your dwelling? Tahoe asked, his breath coming fast. Just over that ridge, Handbit pointed. My cabin is hidden from the main trail. No one will see us there. After another 30 minutes of walking, they reached a small wooden cabin. It looked simple from the outside. Handbit unlocked the door and led them in. The aliens stopped just inside the door, surprised by what they saw. One half of the cabin was normal, a bed, small kitchen, and chair, but the other half looked like a workshop. Tables were covered with tools, engine parts, and half-built devices. Drawings and diagrams hung on every wall. What is all this? Dury asked, looking around in wonder. Handbit picked up a small engine part. My projects. The Air Force lets me test experimental systems, but I like to work on my own ideas too. Tahoe moved closer to a table where a strange-looking engine sat. You built this? Yes, it's a new kind of propulsion system I'm developing, Handbit explained. It creates thrust using magnetic fields instead of burning fuel. The aliens looked at each other. This was not what they expected from a primitive human. Now you see why I understood your system so quickly, Handbit said. I've been working with similar concepts, just at a different level. She gathered tools from around the workshop. Wrenches, soldering equipment, measuring devices, and some electronics. Will these help? She asked, showing them to Dury. The alien examined them. These are very basic, but yes, they might work if we modify them. Handbit grabbed a backpack and started filling it with tools and parts. Let's get back to your ship. We only have about 40 hours before the Gaiol arrive. On the way back, Tahoe was quiet. Finally, he spoke. Why do you live alone in the forest? Shouldn't someone with your skills work in a big laboratory? Handbit smiled slightly. Sometimes people don't like when you think differently. I needed space to work on my ideas without others telling me they can't be done. Dury nodded. Our people are the same. New ideas are often rejected. Back at the ship, they immediately set to work. Handbit laid out her tools, and the aliens brought out theirs. Together, they started modifying the human tools to work with alien technology. This won't connect properly, Tahoe said, trying to attach a human measuring device to an alien power line. Handbit thought for a moment, then grabbed a small device from her pack. Try adding this between them. It's an adapter I made for connecting different systems. Tahoe tried it. Surprisingly, it worked. How did you know that would work? When you work with experimental aircraft, you learn to connect things that weren't meant to be connected, Handbit explained. As night fell, they had created a strange collection of hybrid tools, half human, half alien. Handbit began the delicate process of recalibrating the power core. This is wrong, Tahoe said as he watched her work. Your method violates our engineering protocols. Does your way work? Handbit asked without looking up. No, Tahoe admitted. Then maybe it's time for a new way, she said. Hours passed as Handbit carefully adjusted the settings. Her hands were steady, her movements precise. This was no different than fixing a damaged fighter jet in an emergency, just with higher stakes. Suddenly, the core's blue light steadied. The flickering stopped. It's stabilizing, Dury exclaimed. Handbit held her breath as she made one final adjustment. The core hummed, a smooth, even sound. Power levels at 20% and rising, Tahoe reported, watching the alien displays. His voice held surprise and the beginning of respect. It's working, Handbit said, allowing herself a small smile. We're on our way. The ship's control room glowed with new life. Screens that had been dark now showed data. Lights blinked on panels. The power core hummed steadily. Power at 45%, Dury announced, watching the alien symbols on the main screen. Systems are coming back online. Handbit wiped sweat from her forehead. She had been working for 18 hours straight, stopping only for quick sips of water and energy bars from her pack. Will 45% be enough to fly? She asked. Tahoe shook his head. We need at least 70% for safe flight, and the navigation systems are still offline. A loud beeping came from a panel on the far side of the room. Dury rushed over and touched several controls. A 3D map appeared, showing Earth and the surrounding space. The Gael ship has entered Earth's orbit, Dury said, voice tight with worry. They're scanning the planet. How long until they find us? Handbit asked. Hours. Maybe less, Tahoe replied. Our ship's energy signature is growing stronger as the power increases. They'll detect it soon. Handbit studied the power system. We need to speed this up. Can we bypass some of the safety protocols? Tahoe looked shocked. That would be extremely dangerous. The core could become unstable. More dangerous than the Gaidol finding us. Handbit challenged. Before Tahoe could answer, Dury spoke up. She's right. We have to take risks now. As they worked to carefully bypass safety systems, Handbit asked questions about the Gael. Why are they so interested in an old ship like this? Dury connected two power lines while explaining. Our people have become dependent on automation and standard procedures. We follow the rules exactly. That doesn't answer my question, Handbit said. Tahoe sighed. The Gael are different. They take technology from other species and adapt it in new ways. This ship is old, but the Gael could use its basic systems to create weapons. Handbit thought about this as she worked. So your people are stuck following rules, while the Gael break them to get ahead. Yes, Dury admitted. It's why we're losing the war with them. And why you couldn't fix this ship, Handbit added. You were trying to follow standard procedures when what you needed was a new approach. Tahoe looked uncomfortable, but nodded. I'm beginning to see that. The beeping from the scanner grew louder and faster. They've narrowed their search, Dury said. fear in her voice. "They're focusing on this part of the planet." Handbit worked faster. "Tell me about what they'll do if they find us." Tahoe's voice became grim. "They'll capture our ship, take us prisoner. As for any humans they find—" He paused. "Tell me," Handbit insisted. "They collect specimens from different worlds," Dury explained quietly. "They study them, take them apart to understand how they work. Then they use that knowledge to improve their own species." Handbit felt cold despite the sweat on her skin. This wasn't just about helping two stranded aliens anymore. This was about protecting Earth. "Power at 60%, Tahoe announced. "But there's a problem with the control systems. The bypass is causing power fluctuations." Handbit moved to the pilot's chair and studied the controls. They were different from any aircraft she had flown, but she could see the logic in their design. "I think I can stabilize it from here," she said. "On my fighter jets, sometimes the control panel can override automatic systems." Dury looked doubtful. "You want to manually control the power flow. That's impossible. Even our best pilots couldn't do that." "Your best pilots haven't flown damaged aircraft through lightning storms," Handbit said with a small smile. "Sometimes human hands are better than computers." The scanner alarm changed tone, becoming a steady, high-pitched sound. "They found us," Tahoe said. "The Gael ship is changing course. They're coming directly here." Handbit looked at the scanner. A red dot was moving toward Earth. "How long do we have?" she asked. 2 hours, Dury replied. "Maybe less." Handbit took a deep breath. "Then we have 2 hours to get this ship flying." Time seemed to move too fast. Handbit's fingers worked quickly, connecting wires and adjusting controls. Sweat dripped down her face, but she didn't stop to wipe it away. "Power at 65%, Dury called out. "But the engine systems are still offline." Tahoe worked at another panel, his long fingers moving across alien controls. "I'm trying to restart the engines, but the computer says the power flow is non-standard." Handbit looked up from her work. "That's because we're not doing this the standard way. Can you override the computer?" "That's not how our technology works," Tahoe said with frustration. "The computer prevents incorrect procedures." Handbit stood up. "Let me try something." She moved to Tahoe's panel and studied it. Then she did something that made both aliens gasp. She disconnected the main computer link. "What are you doing?" Dury cried. "That's dangerous." "I'm bypassing your computer," Handbit explained. "In human aircraft, we sometimes have manual overrides for emergencies." She reconnected the wires in a new pattern, linking the power core directly to the engine systems. It wasn't pretty, human tools and materials mixed with alien technology. But it might work. "This goes against all our engineering principles," Tahoe said, but he didn't try to stop her. Handbit smiled slightly. "Sometimes you have to break the rules to survive." The ship suddenly hummed louder. The lights grew brighter. On the main display, new symbols appeared. "Engine systems are coming online," Dury said with surprise. "How did you do that?" "I gave the engines what they needed, power, without asking the computer's permission," Handbit explained. Tahoe checked another screen. "Power at 72%. That's enough to fly, but just barely." "What about weapons?" Handbit asked. The aliens looked at each other. "This is a research vessel," Dury explained. "We have defensive shields, but no weapons." Handbit nodded. "Then we'll have to outfly them." Suddenly, the scanner alarm changed again. The sound was faster, more urgent. "The Gael ship has entered the atmosphere," Tahoe reported. "They'll be here in 20 minutes. Handbit moved to the pilot's chair. "Show me how these controls work." "Now." Dury quickly explained the main flight systems. To Handbit's relief, they were not completely different from Earth aircraft. There were controls for direction, speed, and altitude. The rest she would have to learn as they went. "Power at 78%, Tahoe called. "Still rising." "That's good enough," Handbit decided. We need to take off now. But the pre-flight checks. Dury began. No time, Handbit cut in. The Gaiol are almost here. She placed her hands on the controls and felt the ship respond to her touch. It was alive under her fingers, ready to fly. Prepare for takeoff, she said. Dury and Tejo strapped themselves into seats near control panels. Handbit took a deep breath and activated the main systems. The ship trembled. Dirt and rocks slid off its top as it lifted slightly from the ground. Come on, Handbit whispered to the ship. You can do this. She pushed more power to the engines. The ship rose higher, hovering above the small valley. It's working, Dury said, amazement in her voice. The ship turned slowly, following Handbit's commands. It wasn't smooth. The controls were sluggish and sometimes didn't respond right away. But it was flying. I can't believe it, Tejo said quietly. You actually did it. Handbit didn't have time to feel proud. On the scanner, the Gaiol ship was approaching fast. They've spotted us, Dury warned. They're changing course to intercept. Handbit gripped the controls tighter. Then let's show them what this old ship can do with a human pilot. She pushed the ship forward. It shot across the valley and up into the sky, leaving Earth behind. Handbit felt the familiar thrill of flight, even in this alien craft. This was what she was born to do. Hold on, she told the aliens. Things are about to get interesting. The old alien ship climbed higher into Earth's sky. Handbit's hands moved confidently over the controls, feeling how the ship responded. It was heavier than any aircraft she had flown, but also more powerful. The Gaiol ship is gaining on us, Dury reported, watching the scanner. Their engines are much faster than ours. Handbit nodded. We can't outrun them, but maybe we can outsmart them. She turned the ship toward a bank of thick clouds. The craft shuddered as it entered the dense moisture. What are you doing? Tejo asked, gripping his seat as the ship rocked. This will interfere with our sensors. With theirs too, Handbit said with a small smile. In air combat, clouds are a pilot's best friend. Inside the cloud bank, Handbit made a sharp turn. Then another. She zigzagged through the white mass, making it impossible for anyone to predict their path. Power fluctuating, Dury warned. These maneuvers are straining the engines. Just a little longer, Handbit promised. When she finally took them out of the clouds, they were heading in a completely different direction. The scanner showed the Gaiol ship continuing on their original path. It worked, Dury said with surprise. They lost us. Not for long, Handbit cautioned. They'll realize their mistake soon. She pointed the ship toward a mountain range in the distance. We need a place with cover, somewhere to hide or set a trap. As they flew over the tall mountains, Handbit studied their shape. An idea formed in her mind. There, she said, pointing to a narrow canyon between two peaks. We'll go through there. Tejo looked alarmed. The ship is too wide for that space. It'll fit, Handbit insisted. Barely, but it'll fit. She slowed the ship and carefully aimed for the canyon entrance. The craft turned sideways as she guided it into the narrow space. Wings clearing by less than 2 meters on each side, Dury reported nervously. Handbit's focus was complete. This was like threading a needle, but with a massive alien spacecraft. The canyon walls rushed past on both sides, seeming close enough to touch. They found us again, Tejo called out. Gaiol ship approaching from behind. Handbit nodded. Good. This is where we want them. In this canyon? Dury asked. We're trapped here. They are too, Handbit explained. And I bet their ship is bigger than ours. She increased speed, racing through the twisting canyon. The ship responded to her touch, like it was becoming an extension of her body. Behind them, the Gaiol ship entered the canyon in pursuit. Their ship is 30% larger than ours, Tejo confirmed, checking the scanner. They're having trouble navigating the narrow parts. Handbit saw a place ahead where the canyon split into 2 paths. The right path was slightly wider. The left was barely wide enough for their ship. "Perfect," she whispered. She aimed for the right path, then at the last second, yanked the controls left. Their ship tilted and scraped against rock, but made it through the narrow left passage. "Warning. Hull damage on level 3. Dury called out. "Is it serious?" Handbit asked, not taking her eyes off the path ahead. "No, just surface scratches," Tahoe replied after checking systems. On the scanner, they watched as the Gael ship followed them toward the split. Unable to change course as quickly, the larger ship tried to fit through the right passage, but it was still too narrow. A bright flash lit up the canyon behind them. The scanner showed the Gael ship had collided with the canyon wall. "They've crashed," Dury exclaimed. "Their main engines are down." Handbit didn't slow down. "They might have backup systems. We need to get to open sky." She guided the ship through the last stretch of canyon. When they finally burst out into open air, everyone let out a breath of relief. "Damage report?" Handbit asked. Tahoe checked all systems. Minor hull damage only. Power core stable at 85%. All systems functioning. Dury looked at Handbit with new respect. "You defeated a modern Gael battleship with our old research vessel." Handbit shook her head. "I just used the environment to our advantage. Every pilot learns that lesson." "Not our pilots," Tahoe said quietly. "We're taught to rely on superior technology, not creativity." The ship soared higher, leaving Earth's atmosphere behind. The blue sky faded to black, and stars appeared all around them. Handbit looked out at the vastness of space. "So, where do we go now?" Stars stretched in all directions around the ship. Earth looked like a blue marble behind them. Handbit had never imagined she would see her home planet this way. From space, in an alien craft she had helped repair. "The Gael ship is sending out a distress signal," Dury reported. "Their main systems are down, but life support is working. They'll be rescued eventually." "Then we should be far away by then," Handbit said. She turned to the aliens. "So, what happens now? Where do we go?" Dury and Tahoe looked at each other. Something unspoken passed between them. "We should return to our home system," Tahoe said finally. "Our people will want to know about the Gael incursion into this sector." "And about you," Dury added, looking at Handbit. "Me?" Handbit asked. Tahoe nodded slowly. "A human who could understand our technology, repair our ship, and defeat a Gael vessel. Our leaders will want to meet you." Handbit looked back at Earth. "I have responsibilities there, people who would miss me." "We understand," Dury said. "But think of what you could learn. Our world has technology you've only dreamed of." Handbit was quiet for a moment. The pilot in her wanted to see new worlds, to fly among the stars. But her heart was tied to Earth. "What if I don't go with you?" she asked. "What happens to Earth? Will the Gael come back?" "Probably," Tahoe admitted. "They know about humans now. They might see your species as interesting." The word made Handbit shiver. She remembered what the aliens had told her about how the Gael studied new species. "Then I have to warn my people," she said firmly. "Help them prepare." Dury looked thoughtful. "There might be another option. What if we arranged a formal first contact? An official meeting between your leaders and ours?" "Is that possible?" Handbit asked. "It's not standard procedure for worlds at your technology level," Tahoe began, then stopped himself. "But I'm learning that sometimes standard procedures need to be reconsidered." Handbit smiled. "That's the first time I've heard you say that." Tahoe actually smiled back, a strange expression on his alien face. "You've taught us something important, Handbit. Our rigid ways of thinking have been holding us back. It took a human female pilot to show us that." "So what do we do?" Handbit asked. "We take this ship back to our world," Dury explained. "We tell our leaders about Earth, about the Gael threat, and about you. We propose a protection agreement and cultural exchange." "And I go with you?" Handbit asked. Dury nodded. As Earth's first ambassador. Then we bring you home, with representatives from our world. Hanbit thought about it. This was bigger than her career or her life. This was about protecting Earth and opening a door to the stars. I'll do it, she decided. But I need to send a message to my commanders first. They need to know I'm okay. We can arrange that, Tahoe said. Hanbit took one last look at Earth before turning the ship toward deep space. How long to your world? 3 weeks at this ship's top speed, Dury said. Hanbit smiled. Then you'd better teach me more about these controls, and I'll teach you more about human ways of thinking. As the ship accelerated into the darkness, Hanbit felt a sense of pride. 3 days ago, these aliens had thought she was primitive and simple just because she was human and female. Now they were taking her to their homeworld as Earth's first ambassador to the stars. All because she had seen possibility where they saw only problems. Because she had trusted her training and instincts when facing the unknown. Setting course for the Talon system, Dury announced. Hanbit's hands moved confidently across the alien controls. The stars stretched into lines of light as the ship jumped to faster than light speed. A new chapter was beginning. For Hanbit, for Earth, and for the aliens who had learned never to underestimate a human female pilot.